rain as it makes its way towards the west. Sri Lanka, you could be seeing some very heavy rain showers over the next several days. Down towards the southern part of Africa, we were watching this area of low pressure in the Mozambique Channel. That has now moved onshore to Mozambique, causing some very heavy rain showers there. We are looking at about 200 millimeters or more of rain, so that means some localized flooding in their forecast over the next several days. And then up towards the Arabian Peninsula, temperatures are now coming up, so we are seeing those temperatures rise. Doha about 29 degrees. Abu Dhabi is going to be hitting about 33. Very heavy rain showers up towards Iran. You can see that. But we are looking at some slight rain showers down to the south. Not really picking it up here on the forecast map, but as you can see, for them. And a little bit further towards the north, we are looking at some very windy conditions across most of Iran for them, as well as temperatures for Baghdad, 21.
Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
The army has to prove they have no intentions of hijacking power and of keeping any remnants of the old regime.
From people making the news.
The earthquake happened over a year ago. Now you want to come back and help your fellow Haitians?
To those it affects.
If Washington doesn't begin to help stabilize the government, it will create a backlash.
Behind the headlines.
Neither the United States nor China can hurt the other without hurting itself.
Is the inside story at this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. You're watching Al Jazeera. Let's recap our top stories now. The son of Libya's leader has warned rebel fighters the time has come for a full-scale military assault. But foreign ministers from Arab Gulf states have joined mounting international pressure on the Libyan regime. They say Gaddafi's government has lost legitimacy. NATO and the EU are agreeing, meanwhile, to send warships closer to the Libyan coast, while French President Nicolas Sarkozy has recognized the opposition National Council as the rightful government in Libya. Al Jazeera's Anita McNaught is in Tripoli.
The Gaddafi regime baring its teeth, both in its rhetoric and in its military action. Zawiya, the town to the west of Tripoli, now in ruins. Rebel fighters in the east talking of hundreds dead. A hospital in Ras Lanuf bombed in an airstrike. And the Western powers now pushing the idea of a no-fly zone between committees. NATO saying it won't act without UN Security Council support. Permanent members Russia and China, with the power of veto, highly unlikely to give that support. The International Committee of the Red Cross is now calling this a civil war. Libya is getting used once again to being a pariah state, and its economy has taken an incredibly heavy hit out of this. Whatever victory the Libyan government feels it's going to achieve at the end of this conflict, everyone in Libya is paying an extremely heavy price.
The US president's top intelligence chief says the longer the conflict in Libya drags on, the more likely it is that Muammar Gaddafi's forces will prevail. James Clapper says the Libyan leader has superior weapons and the ability to replenish his forces. Patty Culhane reports now from Washington.
If the rebels in Libya were looking for reassurance as they fight for their lives and freedom, they got the exact opposite from Washington, as the man in charge of all U.S. intelligence agencies forecasted their eventual defeat and a Gaddafi victory.
I think over the longer term that the regime will prevail.
James Clapper told Congress because Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's forces have superior weapons and logistical capabilities, at best, rebels could hope for a stalemate, an outcome the U.S. doesn't want to see. But officials have also made it clear that the U.S. won't be the only country taking steps to prevent that.
The United States acting alone would be stepping into a situation whose consequences are unforeseeable. And I know that's the way our military feels. It's easy for people to say, do this, do that, and then they turn and say, okay, U.S., go do it.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, for the first time, downplaying the potential effectiveness of a no-fly zone, saying it failed to stop the violence in Iraq or Kosovo. The U.S. instead is focusing on diplomatic moves, cutting ties with the Libyan embassy, and Clinton is planning to meet with Libyan opposition leaders next week.
We are still engaged in the process of assessing those groups, the council, and other individuals to find out what their vision is, who they represent, what their ideas are, and where they would take Libya in a post-Gaddafi future.
The Obama administration trying to take back the comments from its very own Director of National Intelligence, the National Security Advisor, telling reporters that Director Clapper was making a static assessment, simply looking at the number of tanks and the kinds of weapons. But if you include things like Gaddafi's isolation or the motivation of the rebels, well, you could come up with a much different assessment. Now, the administration has been very carefully trying to get to Gaddafi's inner circle, to send the message that they will lose. You have to wonder if they're still happy with their Director of National Intelligence after he sent the message to the world that they'll likely win. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, earlier, Al Jazeera spoke to human rights activist Mohammed Ibrahim Al-Laghi. He's also the former Secretary General of the Libyan Human Rights Society. He told us what he made of the latest reports of human rights violations in Libya.
Violations of human rights in Libya are not something new. They started from the early 70s with the dissolution of the Union of Students, and the students were hanged inside the campus in Benghazi. In addition to the massacre of Abu Slim prison, and violations continue in Benghazi and AlJazeera. Crime against humanity and ethnic cleansing, genocide, other crimes are being perpetrated currently in Libya.
So, can I just ask you, do you believe Colonel Gaddafi would let a UN or EU missions actually investigate? Because he's, at some stages, said invited the UN in to investigate. Would that be a genuine offer, and would they be given freedom of access?
No, I don't believe he will allow them. In any event, the issue of violations against human rights in Libya does not require any investigations. It has become common knowledge now, and it is known to one and all. It is history of human rights violations and infringements in Libya. I assume that Saif al-Islam is not a military man. He is a reformist, and he always preached constitutional amendments, human rights advocate. This was his public image, and now he turned into a military leader or a military commander willing to prevent or to muzzle the Libyan people and prevent them from voicing their own freedom. This is what we are going to see next in the coming days.
So do you think that would you actually want to see foreign intervention in Libya at this stage?
Of course, no. I support the no-fly zone to prevent the Libyan jet fighters from bombarding innocent, unsuspecting civilians in Al-Zawiya, Brega, and Ras Lanuf. With the no-fly zone, at any event, the political issue, I leave it to the interim National Council, who is currently representing all of us.
Well, civil liberties groups and prominent Muslim Americans have raised concerns about religious intolerance in U.S. politics.